911, what's your emergency?
Lifesavers, Revv Up! Walang pag-CCC kung papanoorin mong video namin for today. I am Lifesavers from UST Senior High School, and you're now watching the first ever YouTube video of Crisis Control Council. If you didn't know, the UST SHS Crisis Control Council, or CCC, is an organization dedicated to instilling a sense of disaster preparedness among its members and the UST SHS student body, developing initiative in disaster volunteering services in affected areas, and strengthening the skills of the younger generation in responding to natural and man-made disasters. Revving up the official YouTube channel of CCC, let us all welcome a certified lifesaver, Mr. Patrick Tequilag, for us to know more about first aid.
So hello guys, so my name is Patrick Tequilag. I am a former UST SHS Crisis Control Council member and a former president of the UST SHS Crisis Control Council academic year 2020-2021. I am alumnus of the UST Senior High School and I am also a licensed first aider. So guys, today we will be talking about first aid. But before that, we must first know what is first aid. With that being said, keep watching the video in order to know more on how to save lives. Here are 4 things that you should know in order to become a future lifesaver. 1. The 3 P's of first aid. 2nd, the legal concerns of first aid. Next is the common diseases. And lastly, the transmission prevention of these common diseases. First, we have the 3 P's of first aid. The 3 P's of first aid are preserve life, prevent further injury or harm, and promote recovery. We must always remember these 3 P's when we are giving first aid to a victim, as it will guide us on how we give first aid and make sure that the first aid that we are giving to the victim is of a high standard and also of quality of care. Next, we have the legal concerns concerning first aid. The first of which is consent. First aid will always require consent from the victim. Regardless of the situation, consent must be sought first. Consent may come from the patient's guardian, or the bystanders who have witnessed the accident occur, but this is only a last resort. If the victim is unconscious and cannot give consent, and if the victim is also alone. Next is our duty to act. A first aider will always have the duty to act, but keep in mind that not every situation calls for help shall be answered. We must always take into account the priorities of a first aider, which are first, our own selves, next is our partner or our team, and lastly, the patient or the victim. Taking this into consideration, if the scene has already been proven to be unsafe or dangerous, it is better not to get involved rather than adding to the number of casualties or the number of injured people. Be wise enough to determine a fine line between abandonment of a scene when necessary and negligence. Abandonment of the scene may be proven necessary if you have assessed the scene and it has already been proven to be unsafe or risky for any of your first aid members or you to enter. However, if the scene has been proven to be unsafe or that there are no risks involved in performing first aid on the victim, and you have failed to do so or have failed to take any actions, then that would be called negligence or failure to do our duty to act. The third concern is standard of care. We must always remember that first aiders, that when we are giving first aid, we must also take into account the quality of care of the first aid that we are giving. As low quality care of first aid given to a victim or a patient may cause further injury or harm to the victim and may also lead to the deterioration of the victim's life prematurely. That is why we must always remember the 3 P's involved in first aid, and that comes into play in our legal concern for our standard of care. We must always uphold a high standard of care in order for us to perform well and to give the best quality first aid that we can give to our victims. The last concern regarding first aid would be confidentiality of information. Confidentiality of information is always important, as the information gathered or collected from the patient or the victim must not be shared to anyone except only to the primary healthcare team that will be involved with the care for the patient. Sharing of this information outside of the patient's knowledge and outside of the primary healthcare team would be a violation in the patient confidentiality. Next, we move on to disease transmission. There are 3 ways of common disease transmissions: direct, indirect, or airborne transmission. Direct transmission usually happens when there is human-to-human interaction or skin-to-skin interaction, and in some cases, bodily fluids such as blood, sputum, urine, or saliva interacting with you and the patient. The second is indirect transmission, where the disease is passed through a vector or a vehicle, which can be an animal or an object. One example of this being food poisoning. Lastly, we have airborne transmission, much like COVID-19. As transmission is inevitable, there are simple ways to avoid such events from occurring, better known as universal precautions. These are the steps taken in order to avoid transmission. This includes personal isolation, improving hygiene, proper hand washing and alcohol usage, maintaining social distancing, and lastly, wearing PPE or personal protective equipment like gloves, face masks, scrubs, face shields.
Lifesavers, make sure to not forget about the 3 P's of first aiding: to prevent life, prevent further harm, and promote recovery. With that, keeping the 3 P's in mind, the victim's life and welfare shall be prioritized among all.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed and learned a lot from today's episode, Revving Up. And of course, thank you to our dear speaker, Mr. Patrick Takiling. Sabi ko sa inyo, walang pagsisisi kung papanoorin mo to, diba? At lalong walang magiging pagsisisi if you like and subscribe to our channel. Like and follow our social media accounts. Facebook is UST SHS Crisis Control Council, and our Twitter is @_UST SHS CCC, that will all be linked below. Once again, I am Lifesavers Zild, na nagpapalala sa inyong walang pagsisisi dito sa CCC. See you next time.